My name is Dr. Grace Varela, or at least it used to be. There was a time when that name commanded respect in every hospital hallway I walked down. Before I became just a cautionary tale. Before Daniel. I met him in med school. He was in his third year, brilliant, magnetic, the kind of man who could make you forget your name just by saying yours. I was fresh into my first semester. Bright-eyed, determined, cautious. I didn't fall easily, but Daniel was a force. He talked about us opening a clinic together one day. Family practice. A literal family, he said, with 2 kids and a dog, maybe a garden in the back. For a while it all seemed real. After med school, I took a residency in internal medicine. He chose emergency care. Always drawn to adrenaline, the chaos of the ER. We moved in together, got married. He pushed me to keep working while we built up savings. I did. What I didn't realize then, what I refused to see, was how often I was being quietly erased. The house was in his name, because his credit was better. The joint account. He insisted he'd manage it, since I was so busy with rotations. The fertility appointments. Always rescheduled at the last minute. Always my fault for having unrealistic timelines. But I stayed. 'Cause I loved him. And then one day, I came home early and found his suitcase packed. "I'm leaving," he said without flinching. "This isn't working anymore." Just like that. 10 years together. He didn't cry. Didn't argue. Just handed me an envelope. It was the divorce petition. Inside was a preliminary property list. He was claiming everything. The house. Car. Even the shared investment account that we opened using my residency salary. He wrote that I had abandoned the marriage. That I was obsessive and emotionally erratic. But the worst part came at the hearing. I expected him to be cold. I didn't expect cruelty. He told the judge I was infertile. That I'd hidden miscarriages from him. That I'd screamed at patients, falsified medication logs during a night shift. That I was unfit to practice medicine. And possibly unfit to be a mother. None of it was true. But he brought a witness. His new girlfriend, a junior nurse from his hospital, who swore she'd seen me break down in front of a child. I sat frozen in my seat as the courtroom echoed with his lies. When the judge finally ruled, I had nothing left. The house was his. Car too. I was ordered to pay him a settlement for emotional distress. He walked past me outside the courtroom, smirked and said, "Should have known better than to bet on a broken woman." That was the last time I saw him. I left the city 2 days later with a duffel bag, a few boxes, and the last shreds of my dignity. I took a job in a small rural clinic. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I needed quiet. I needed time to remember who I was before I met Daniel. The work helped. My patients were simple, kind. They didn't care about past lawsuits or gossip. They cared that I listened, that I showed up. And slowly I started to breathe again. I got licensed in trauma care and picked up shifts at a nearby hospital. It was rougher than clinic work, but I liked the rhythm. Sharp, urgent, requiring instinct. It reminded me I still had a pulse. That I was still good at something. No one here knew my past. I didn't offer it. That's how 3 years passed. Quietly. Healing. Until one morning everything shifted. I arrived at the trauma center early. Rain tapped softly on the roof. And the ER felt calm for once. I was sipping bad coffee and scanning vitals when the paramedic line rang. "Code blue incoming," the dispatcher said. Mid-40s male, car crash, probable internal bleeding, low O2 sats. Airlift en route. Arriving in 6. We scrambled into motion. Crash team prepped the trauma bay. I snapped into surgical gloves, reviewed the field report, and moved to receive. Then the stretcher rolled in. And I saw his face. Even half-conscious, bloodied, and masked. There was no mistaking him. Daniel. Froze. The nurse beside me nudged my shoulder. "Dr. Varela. He's crashing." I snapped back. "Get an or ready. We need scans, blood, vitals now." As we wheeled him through the corridor, I studied his chart. No known allergies. No next of kin listed. No emergency contact. Just a wallet with his name and an out-of-state ID. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. And now, here he was, my ex-husband, on my table struggling to breathe. Ruptured spleen, fractured ribs, lung contusion, BP dropping, vitals, SpO2 down to 79%. He's not stable. Gave the call. Intubate. Prep for thoracotomy. He was slipping fast. The monitors screamed. I leaned over his mask. He was half awake now, groggy, confused. His eyes flickered, unfocused. And then, they landed on me. His lips moved under the mask. One word. Grace. I stared down at him, emotion fighting reason. The man who destroyed me. Who left me in a courtroom stripped of everything I was. Who paraded his new life while I quietly rebuilt mine. He was looking at me like he'd seen a ghost. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. Felt nothing. After surgery, he was stabilized and moved to ICU. I handed his care to the attending on rotation. I wanted distance. I needed space. But the hospital was short-staffed. The next morning I was paged. Patient, Daniel Grayson. O2 irregularity overnight. Possible mask dislodgement. Nurse requests review. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something pulled me toward his room. When I entered, he was awake. And terrified. He looked up at me and whispered, "You work here." I didn't answer. He struggled to sit up. "Grace, I didn't know. I didn't know you were still in medicine." Kept my voice level. "You shouldn't speak. You need rest." "Please," he said. "Let me explain." I walked over, adjusted his oxygen, and stood silently as the machine beeped steadily beside him. He started crying. Actually crying. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't think it would ever come to this. I made mistakes. I was scared. I didn't know how to undo it." I looked at the man in front of me and wondered how someone so cruel could be so small now. So powerless. He reached for my hand. And that's when I removed the oxygen mask. Not fully. Just enough to make him pause. To make the air catch in his throat. "I'm not here for closure," I said quietly. "I'm here because you're lucky the doctor on call didn't hold a grudge." He tried to speak. I placed the mask back on his face. "Rest," I said. "You're going to need your strength." And I walked out of the room without looking back. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the moment in the ICU. His eyes widening, his voice cracking, the way his fingers trembled when they reached for mine. Should have felt like power, like victory, like something. But all I felt was a sharp, hollow ache. I had spent 3 years rebuilding myself, brick by lonely brick. I thought I had moved on. But seeing him vulnerable again at my mercy, cracked something open. Not out of longing, not even revenge, out of pity. And that made me angry. The next morning, the charge nurse caught me just before I clocked in. "Dr. Varela," she said carefully. "Mr. Grayson asked for you again." I didn't respond. He refused food from anyone else. Wouldn't even open his mouth until we mentioned you. I sighed. "Put him on the general list. He doesn't get to choose his staff." She hesitated. "He also left a message for you." She handed me a folded sheet of paper. I tucked it into my pocket without reading it. My shift was a blur of broken bones, blunt trauma, and emotional triage. I stitched up a drunk teen who swore he just tripped, calmed a woman with early-onset dementia who didn't remember being hit by a car, and spent 2 hours fighting for a man who coded twice before stabilizing. But through it all, I felt his eyes on me, even from across the building. Like Daniel's very presence had opened a corridor of memories I thought I'd bricked shut. That evening, when I finally reached into my coat and pulled out the note, it wasn't long or dramatic. Just one line. "Please, let me talk to you. I need you to know the truth." The truth. From a man who twisted it for sport. I found myself walking toward his room. Not to listen. To look him in the eye one last time. To end it on my terms. When I entered, he was sitting upright, eyes tired but alert. His voice was softer now, almost boyish. "You look exactly the same." I didn't answer. "You probably hate me." "That's not a strong enough word," I said flatly. He nodded. "I deserve that." "I'm not here for closure," I said again. "Then why are you here?" Pause. "Because I wanted to see the face of the man who shattered mine, and still dares to beg." He swallowed hard. "I didn't come here on purpose." "You think this is about coincidence?" Snap. "You think crashing into my trauma bay was some kind of fate? This isn't a movie, Daniel. This is just proof that karma has a long memory." Silence hung between us like static. Then he whispered, "I'm dying, Grace." Froze. "What?" He motioned toward his chest. "Pulmonary fibrosis. They caught it late. Surgery might buy me time, but..." He trailed off. "The prognosis isn't good." I didn't know what to say. I hated him. I also knew what it felt like to hear those words in a sterile room. "How long?" finally asked. "Months. Maybe less." "And what do you want from me now?" said almost bitter. "Forgiveness. Sympathy." "No," he said quietly. "I want to tell you what really happened. Before it's too late." What followed wasn't an apology. It was a confession. He told me that during our marriage, he'd felt inadequate. That I was more driven, more disciplined, and he resented it. That when the fertility treatments failed, it triggered something ugly in him. He blamed me, punished me. "I was jealous of your strength," he said. "I wanted to be admired. I wanted to be you." So when his affair started with that nurse, it wasn't love. It was validation. And when I filed for separation first, quietly with dignity, he panicked. He hired a shark of a lawyer and decided to go nuclear in court. Destroying my credibility was easier than facing his own. The lies at the hearing, the therapy notes, the fake breakdown. He shook his head. All fabricated. I needed to win. I didn't care how. I stared at him, fury threatening to rise. "You called me barren. You said I was unstable." "I know," he whispered. "And I regret every word." The silence between us was unbearable. "You could have ruined my entire career," I said. "You nearly did. But you survived," he said with something like awe. "You survived it all." And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about closure or forgiveness. It was about him trying to die clean. And me choosing whether or not to let him. Later that night, I stood outside the ICU doors, heart pounding. I felt like I had just walked barefoot across glass. I took the long way home, stopped by the lake, sat on a bench under the stars and let the cold air sting my face. And I remembered something. A few months after the divorce, I'd broken down in a pharmacy aisle, sobbing into my sleeve, clutching a box of sleeping pills I didn't need. An older woman had come over and just sat with me. She never asked what was wrong. She didn't offer advice. She just let me cry until I couldn't anymore. Before she left, she said, "What's meant for you doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. But it still comes." At the time, I hadn't understood. But now I did. The next day, I submitted my transfer papers. It was time. I had stayed here long enough, hidden long enough. The world was bigger than the pain he caused me. I wanted to practice medicine in a place where my past didn't haunt me through glass doors and pagers. But before I left, I had one final task. I returned to Daniel's room. He looked weaker now. Ill. Diminished. He blinked up at me. "Are you leaving?" "Yes." "Will you come back?" "No." He nodded as if he'd expected that. "I'm sorry," he said again. This time I didn't say anything. Instead, I reached forward, removed his oxygen mask gently, and looked him in the eye. "You took everything from me," I said. "But I made a life anyway. Better one. You'll die knowing you lost someone who became stronger without you." He closed his eyes, placed the mask back. Then I left. And I didn't look back. 3 weeks later, I stood under the clean white lights of a new hospital. New badge. New uniform. New beginning. It felt like stepping onto dry land after years of treading water. The trauma center here was larger, busier. Cases came in back to back. No time for emotional flashbacks or ghosts of ex-husbands. Exactly what I needed. I threw myself into it. The first night on call, I worked a 20-hour shift. The second night, I saved a teenager in cardiac arrest and stitched a girl who reminded me too much of who I once was. Afraid, overlooked, still fighting. And for a while it felt like peace. But closure is never clean. Especially not when a letter arrives with your name handwritten on the front. It was waiting for me in my new apartment mailbox. No return address. No hospital logo. Dr. Grace Varela. Still the best doctor I know. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. Folded precisely. Daniel's handwriting. Grace, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't. But I wanted you to know I kept something. Something I should have told you about a long time ago. Years ago, during our first round of fertility tests. You remember the one I pretended we had to cancel because of a shift change. I lied. I went alone. The results showed that I was the one with the issue. Not you. Me. I was afraid. Afraid it would make me less of a man. Afraid you'd leave. So I buried it. And I let you think it was your fault. I let you carry the blame. That's the truth. I hope it brings you some kind of peace. You were never broken. It was Daniel. I sat down on the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. 4 years I'd carried that guilt. The failed test. The judgmental doctors. The endless nights wondering if I wasn't enough woman to be a mother. And he had known. He had let me grieve that lie. Let me cry over a future I thought I'd ruined. Let me walk away thinking I was the problem. I felt something hot rise in my throat. Not anger this time, not sadness. Just the weight of truth finally laid bare. And something else too. A deep, slow understanding that the real betrayal had never been the divorce. It had been the silence. The rewriting of our past to serve his fear. A week passed. Then 2. I kept the letter locked in a drawer I never opened. Then one evening, walking home from the hospital, I passed a park and heard laughter. Sharp, bright, unburdened. Children playing. A boy around 5 or 6 chased his mom with a paper airplane, giggling until he tripped and fell into her arms. Something in me cracked. I had spent so long building walls, protecting myself from loss, from longing, from everything Daniel took. But he didn't just take my past. He tried to erase my future. And I was done letting him. Later that month, during my break, I walked into the OB/GYN clinic. I filled out the forms. I answered the questions. And for the first time in years I saw it in writing. No known fertility barrier. No longer clouded by doubt or shame. Just a clean slate. I wasn't sure I wanted a child. Not yet. But knowing that I could, on my own terms, was more than enough. Then came the phone call. Dr. Varela. Yes. This is Riverside Memorial in Elkhart. You were listed as a potential contact for Mr. Daniel Grayson. He passed away this morning. My mouth went dry. I was listed. Yes. On his advance directive. You're the only name. I hung up without answering. Heart pounding. Mind racing. He'd put me as his final contact. Even after everything. I didn't attend the funeral. But a week later a package arrived. No note. Just a flash drive. An illegal envelope. The flash drive contained a video. I hesitated before playing it. Then I press play. Daniel is seated in a hospital bed. Pale oxygen tubes fitted. His voice is low, weak. Grace, if you're seeing this, then I'm gone. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But I wanted you to have this. He reaches for a stack of papers beside him. This is everything. The falsified court documents. The therapy notes I edited. The forged emails I gave my lawyer to make you look unstable. I've sent copies to your old legal team. To the board. You deserved better. I can't undo what I did. But maybe this helps clean your record. I don't want you to be remembered as the woman I tried to destroy. I want you to be remembered as the woman who rose anyway. And if you ever do become a mom, I hope they inherit your strength, not my cowardice. Pauses. Goodbye, Grace. The legal envelope confirmed it. Daniel had formally submitted a sworn affidavit admitting to perjury and document tampering. Attached was a copy of a notarized statement. He had updated his will. I wasn't left money. I didn't want it. But there in black ink was a line that made my breath hitch. I, Daniel Grayson, leave my shares in the Grayson Foundation for Women's Health to Dr. Grace Varela, with the hope that she will use them to help the women I once failed, and the woman I never deserved. 2 months later, my medical board reinstated me with full honors. 3 months later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium and delivered a speech on trauma-informed care, sponsored by the very foundation that once bore Daniel's name. And 6 months after that, I launched my own clinic. For women rebuilding after domestic abuse, medical trauma, and legal manipulation. We called it The Hearing because every woman deserves one. One day, while walking through the clinic halls, a little boy tugged at my coat pocket. "Are you the doctor?" he asked. Smiled. "I am." He pointed to a poster on the wall, a drawing of a woman in scrubs holding a stethoscope and a cape. "Is that a superhero?" I knelt down and said, "She's just someone who learned to breathe again." Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories.